Good afternoon, Clyde Today members. Kevin Brown here with Clyde Communications, along with our lead lawyer on the Enbridge court case, Malcolm McPherson. We just concluded a community meeting here at the House of Ancestors. Malcolm and his colleague Cohen were here to update community members on where the Enbridge court case is at. And very exciting today, Malcolm, we had several Clyde members who wanted to provide extra testimony. Tell some more of the stories of their recollections of that day in 2018 that the pipeline exploded. So what stood out for you today, Malcolm, based on what you heard from community members?
Well, thank you, Kevin. I guess I'll first start off by just explaining what we did today. It was a follow-up from the last meeting on June 12th. And the purpose was really to continue a conversation. There was a lot of really good feedback provided at the last meeting. Chief and Council wants to ensure that the community is behind it every step of the way. To answer your specific question about testimony, yes, we took a number of statements today, and one was actually quite explosive. It was very interesting. Obviously, we can't disclose too much at this point, but if true, it would lead one to believe that there were perhaps some inappropriate actions taken by Enbridge following the explosion.
There was strong encouragement from members in attendance at today's meeting. The Chief and Council, along with your team at Clark Wilson, should continue to press ahead with the court case. Was that the sense you got listening to members today?
It was, yeah, the overwhelming message was press on. Many speakers did not mince words. I definitely recall one speaker saying it's time to pull the plug. Another speaker got up and was just expressed how disheartened he was with, well, what he described as Enbridge's sort of Calgary-centric, out of touch with British Columbia, not understanding unceded territory, not understanding that to be a good corporate citizen, you have to follow the law of the land, and you have to do the right thing. And in this case, it's ensuring the safety of the membership, the safety of the people that live right beside this pipeline, which exploded. And then secondly, you know, a meaningful sharing of the wealth. Because, you know, if we look at, and you and I, Kevin, spoke about this the last time I was up, and the Supreme Court jurisprudence is very clear that the nations, you know, for the lack of a better term, are like co-landlords. So it's not only the Crown, but it's the nation on whose land these hydrocarbons are being transported across. And to this juncture, there's no respect for that co-landlordship. That obviously needs to change. There's a movement afoot in British Columbia across Canada, and that movement really is sort of a collective waking up of the nations. You know, recently, of course, tragically, you know, with the residential school discoveries, that sort of awoken a spirit of, you know what, we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to take it from large corporations that'll just do whatever they please. That's come through.
We heard today from several members about reconciliation and how the two senior governments have indicated to BC First Nations and others across the country that we want a new relationship with Indigenous communities across the country, and yet corporate Canada doesn't seem to be getting the message. Have you received any indication from Enbridge that there's any spirit of reconciliation in that company?
Well, what we've observed from Enbridge is, you know, more of the same. And what I mean by that is, at least through their action, they seem to not care. They use words, pretty words, to say they care, but the actions are just not following. That's been the general consensus from what we've heard at the community level. And I'll go a little further. You know, if you read Enbridge's response to the explosion, they don't use the word explosion. They say incident, right? So, you know, no, it wasn't an incident. It was an explosion, a very large explosion, a fireball that shook buildings, and glass fell from the sky, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, that's what the community is dealing with. They're dealing with a party that can't even admit what they've done. Yeah. The other thing that came up today, and it was an elder that pointed this out, they said, Enbridge bought this pipeline from Spectra. And during the years that Spectra ran it, there were no explosions. But shortly after Enbridge took over, there was this large explosion. I hadn't really thought of it that way.
You talked a bit today about strong evidence through some of the exchange of documents that have occurred between Lheidli First Nation and Enbridge about deferred maintenance. And I think that is an eye-opener for a lot of Lheidli members, that what do you mean a company that's bound to do regular maintenance on this important piece of infrastructure would defer it, put it off to save possibly some dollars now, but maybe have to spend it down? Is that an important part of what you found in that exchange of documents to date?
Well, yeah, it's really a good point you raise. And what obviously I can't disclose everything that has been shared, but here's what I will say, is with Enbridge there's a huge disconnect between what they say and what they do. And yet again, we have a corporation like Enbridge that purports to be world-class, to be able to safely transport hydrocarbons through the territories of the Indigenous nations, and yet they deferred maintenance and there was a huge explosion. So again, this disconnect between what is said and what actually happens.
Mm-hmm. You were good at explaining to members here today, and I would ask you to do so for the members viewing from home. The next step in this process that's now 2+ years old since the case was launched in February 2019. You mentioned the next phase of work is the examination for discovery. Can you please tell us a little bit about what that is and what's involved?
Sure. So I guess at a high level, where we're at is there's been an exchange of documents between the parties. That's one key part of the process. And we're now at the stage where we still require a few more documents from Enbridge that are germane. The next step will be, as you said, examination for discovery. And that step is where the parties on both sides are able to test the evidence that they have reviewed by bringing witnesses to speak under testimony. And we're able to then ask questions about the evidence that was tendered, as well as questions about what happened on the day of the explosion. We'll be able to speak to managers and people that are in charge of safety, etc. So, and the idea there is that you further your lawsuit, right? You further or back up the main arguments in your lawsuit. You see. So that's the immediate next stage. However, we will also, of course, be looking to set a trial date sooner rather than later. It's most unfortunate. The parties took about a year to see if there was a reasonable meeting of the minds. And as I might have mentioned the last time we met, at least from the perspective of the community and Chief and Council, the last offer did not address safety in any way, and was described as pitiful.
The question, of course, on everybody's mind is how much longer is it going to take? The explosion occurred in October 2018. Claytley launched the court case in February 2019. We're now in July of 2021, and you've described the next steps in the process. Is there a ballpark estimate that you have as to how much longer this could potentially go?
Yeah, well, with the court process, it's unfortunately a slower one, but also for good reason, because there's a lot of evidence that needs to be carefully reviewed. So it'll probably take, and this is real ballpark here, but probably about 6 or so months to get through discoveries. Following which we would then set a trial date. But we can set a trial date prior to finishing discoveries. So just a hypothetical, if tomorrow, well not tomorrow, but Monday, we were to seek out a court date and we're to get one, it would be about 2 years out because the courts are fairly backed up. Now that being said though, there are other tools available to the nation to utilize that are not totally legal dependent. And, I'm obviously not going to talk about those today,
right.
But Enbridge will find out soon enough.
Is there always a chance, Malcolm, that the two sides could consider a settlement offer of some sort? Is that still an option that's available?
It absolutely is. Yeah, parties can always settle. The problem is just there is no meeting at the mines. And the reason there isn't meeting minds is quite frankly, is that Enbridge is totally disconnected from the reality of the situation.
So in a nutshell, it's onward, it's forward. Chief and Counsel's been clear. It wants to see the case continue. Members, I think, were very supportive today to say, keep up the pressure. And as you stated, one of our elders, it's time to pull the plug, or at least give them warning that Clyde Tenay wants to see the plug pulled on those gas lines.
I think that's well articulated. The risk of oversimplification. In good faith, the nation approached the matter with commercial reasonability, with some honey. And unfortunately now it looks like they're going to have to use more of the vinegar. That's not what ultimately was wanted. Safety was first and foremost and is still the priority. But the problem is, how do you do a deal with another party that offers peanuts in the way of compensation, right? Has no interest in sort of thinking outside of the proverbial box, and thirdly, has no interest in considering things like building bridges or allowing insight into having some oversight for matters relating to safety. When that's not there, it's next to impossible to get a deal done.
But a company that still wants to do business in British Columbia.
Yeah, no, that's right. Enbridge, I would imagine probably has aspirations to continue building pipeline corridors and pipelines through the traditional territories of the Indigenous populations of BC, where there are no treaties. And to be frank, it's quite surprising. It seems like an unwise business move to act in such an unreasonable way with such an important nation as the Clyde Tenay. It is BC's northern capital, of course, and has many neighbors that it speaks with. And as all things in business typically turn around reputation. And Kevin, as you and I both know, Enbridge has had a hard time with its reputation in BC thus far, and I really don't see how not coming to a reasonable resolution with a nation like Clyde Tenay helps them.
Yeah. As always, members, Malcolm is available to receive your phone calls, answer your questions. His colleague Cohen is interested in hearing from members. If you have any additional information you want to share from your perspective about the day of the incident and how it's impacted you and your family, Malcolm's phone number will be below this frame so that you can call anytime. And Malcolm, that's it. Thanks for your time coming up to Clyde territory again to continue to communicate and be available to community members. And members, just because it's summertime, don't think you have to wait to give them a phone call. Call them anytime if you've got information or questions. Malcolm, thanks for your time again, as always. And the news, members, is the case does continue.
Thank you, Kevin.